Hello and welcome along to the special edition of the On the Whistle podcast. I'm your normal Hossein Nabi, but today the show is going to be hosted by our women's football editor, Firdose Moonda. She has spoken to Jay Mwamba, who has written the story to this amazing narrative about what happened to the Zambian football team of 1993-1994. It's called The Crash of the Buffalo. For those of you who know and consume the show, you would have known that we spoke to Kalusha Bwalia on the past, a Zambian legend, an African legend, and he was a part of that team that was on a quest in 1993 to qualify for the 1994 World Cup in the United States. But tragically, there was a plane crash involving the vast majority of that squad, and many of those Zambian players perished. The only survivor being Kalusha Bwalia, who by fate was not on that flight. And what ended up happening from there is one of the most remarkable stories in African football, as Zambia, Chipolopolo, the Copper Bullets, found a way to heal, rebuild, and make one of the most miraculous comebacks and runs in Africa Cup of Nations history. I won't say any more. We'll let Firdose and Jay take the conversation away.
Well, Jay, thank you very much for joining us here on the Whistle. We're so excited to have this conversation. It's probably the story of African football that crosses, socio-political, cultural lines, and also really speaks to the human interest of this. So you've written a book, and it's about the Zambian football team from 1993. I mean, you're Zambian, but tell us about what made you want to explore this and write a whole book on it.
Yeah, well, as you mentioned, I am Zambian, and my background is journalism. I worked for the Zambia Daily Mail. I was a sports reporter from 1982, January. I was very young, straight out of journalism college, till December 88, and that's when I left Zambia. Wow. But I knew the players. I'd covered Zambian football. Gosh. I knew a lot of the players that died in the plane crash. I knew one of the pilots. Oh. So they were my friends, they were my heroes, and of course it was a tragic event, and it shocked the world, And at first I never thought I would write anything about it, but later on, I thought to myself that this has to be documented, for posterity. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm so sorry to hear that. I mean, these were people in your life, right? I mean, just maybe before you go on, can you tell us what your relationship with them was? I mean, they were a good football team. They were on course for the World Cup, but they were also a group of men who I'm sure were your friends.
Absolutely, yeah. Most of them, yeah. I traveled with them because I covered Zambia in a lot of places. We knocked Cameroon out of the '86 World Cup qualifiers. I was with them in Malawi, Zimbabwe, Egypt, a lot of other places. So yeah, so they were, as I say, professional colleagues, if you may, in that I covered them and they were friends. And yeah, they were brothers, fathers, sons of, huge families. So it was a loss on many, many levels.
Yeah. And where were you when the plane crashed? I mean, you say you'd left journalism by that point. Where were you and what was your immediate reaction?
Yes, I had actually moved to the US January 89, came to New York basically to continue my education. Okay. And after I took a year off from writing, and after the 1990 World Cup in Italy, I resumed writing here. So I've been the Irish Echo soccer, as they call it here, and boxing correspondent since 1991. I mean, apart from my day job, my other real job, yeah. So I was here. I'd spoken to Kalusha a week before, and he was playing for PSV Eindhoven in Holland, and he had told me that he would be flying to Dakar via Paris the following Tuesday to join the team because they were going to play. They were going to start the playoff. There were three teams in Zambia's playoff group: Senegal, Morocco, and the first game was going to be against Senegal in Dakar. And the team, has been documented. They had flown to Mauritius for an AFCON qualifier the previous week. Kalusha didn't go there, and he was going to join them in Senegal. So he calls me early here. It's Wednesday morning, so it's April 28th, early in the morning, like 5 in the morning. And back in the day, we didn't have cell phones here. We had a landline, and lived in an apartment with my brothers. And one of my brothers came and knocks on my door like 5 a.m. Says, "Oh, Kalusha's on the phone." I'm wondering, why is he calling so early? He's supposed to be on his way to Senegal. So I got out of my room, picked up the phone, and the first thing he just says, "Oh, the plane." And when he said that, it's like I already knew what was going to follow, and just shattering, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, what I suppose a lot of us would want to know, you got the phone call from the guy who everybody talks about as, almost the hand of God, I guess, that he wasn't on that flight and that he survived that. But was he in a state of shock? Was he, these were all his teammates, this was his future, but he was also, I suppose, really lucky not to have been on that flight. What was he like?
Well, the thing about Kalusha, and I discovered this much later, and I've known Kalusha since we were teenagers. So we're about the same age. He, apart from the fact that he was a phenomenal football player, his mental fortitude is very, very tough emotionally. He was subdued. And that's because I always wondered how he was able to continue, with the rebuild team, how he was able to, he basically steered the rebuild team because of this strength he has, this emotional strength he has. And he was very calm. He was, at one point, and I mentioned this in the book, he was dejected when the day the remains of the team arrived in Lusaka. From the airport, they went straight to the stadium, and they had removed the goalposts. It's late afternoon rather. It's about 6 or so. The sun's going down. It's dusk, and they have the caskets on the pitch there, and 30 of them, and the families are gathered around. Their loved ones. And Kalusha says, he tells me, I looked around. This is the pitch where we had a lot of great moments, a lot of great victories, a lot of success. There were no goalposts. The sun is going down. It's dusk. And I said to myself, we'll never play football again. At that point, sure. it was over for him. Yeah.
Wow. I mean, what an amazingly touching and really, really heart-touching way of describing it. And I was going to ask you that actually, these were people you knew and people he knew. Did you ever think you'd write about football? And obviously he didn't think he'd play. So what convinced him to carry on?
Well, what happened is that now this is this is now just before the burial. So after the burial, he's summoned to State House. The president then, Chiluba, summons him, and he says, "Skipper, we need to." I guess he had been convinced. I understand there was a discussion on the plane that went to Gabon to retrieve the bodies. There was a discussion there whether Zambia should continue with the World Cup and AFCON qualifiers, and they decided that they should. And I think that was relayed to the president. And this was narrated to me by one of the journalists that was on the plane. It's also in my book. And I think after the burial, the president calls Kalusha to State House and says, we should continue. Otherwise, our heroes would have died in vain. So, and then Kalusha, 24 hours after he thought it was over, after he thought Zambian football was dead, he says, okay, let's do this. Yeah.
Wow. I mean, I just want to ask you from a personal point of view, there's two elements to the story. There's the football and the fact that they wanted to carry on playing football. And then there's this incredible loss of life. How did you approach that as a writer? Were you writing it more as a football story, or were you writing it as a story of 30 odd people's lives who just ended?
A little of both. I looked at it from the football perspective and also from the human, interest perspective, the emotional perspective. So basically, I conducted a lot of interviews. Some of them, worked out. Some did not. But it was just a lot of interviewing people, getting the perspectives. And of course, you get a lot of different stories. But what I did is that if somebody collaborates, I need at least 2 or 3 people to collaborate something before I include it. Because you get a lot of information, and some of it, time has passed, even for myself. I mean, it's 32 years already. I mean, it's like yesterday, honestly. For a lot of people, it's like yesterday. But it's 32 years, and there's certain things I think I remember in a certain way, but they were not like that. Yeah. So that's what I did. I just spoke to a lot of people on an emotional level. I spoke to who was then like the third choice goalkeeper, Martin Mwamba, no relation to me. And he was dropped the morning of the, departure for Gabon. They woke up at the lodge where the team was staying, and he was summoned by the two coaches and said, "Well, Kalusha and Charles Musonda will join us in Senegal. So you and another player, Andrew Tembo, we have to, stay behind." And so I interviewed Martin, and he gave me details. He even told me what they had for breakfast.
Oh gosh.
Yep. And he left. He went into the city center to get his allowances from the Football Association's, office, and he meets the team again there. They had gone there to collect the kit, the uniforms they were going to wear in Dakar, and he says bye to them. And long story short, he's traveling to Kitwe, but he gets there. He arrives there at around midnight. He arrives at his house around midnight, not knowing that was just around the time the plane had crashed in Libreville. And he went to bed, woke up in the morning and hears his wife crying. And it's like, why are you crying? So she had heard on the radio. He woke up late, of course, yeah. Yeah, so he overslept, I guess, yeah. So, yeah, so that, those are the kind of the interviews that helped me, piece this story together.
Yeah, incredible. And just, from your own perspective, they carried on playing football, as you mentioned, and the decision was taken. Do you think it was the correct decision? And have you reflected on that in the book?
Yes, it was a correct decision because Zambia, even I myself in the so-called diaspora here, I was depressed. Zambia was just shattered. The air had been sucked out of the country, and they needed something to tide them over. There was no counseling. There were no, psychiatrists. Nobody. You couldn't receive that kind of help. So that they needed that to lift them, and it did lift spirits. It did lift spirits. Yeah. The fact that they came back 10 weeks after the crash, the rebuild team defeats Morocco, big rivals, 2-1. They come from behind, not only just defeating them, but they come from a goal behind. Yeah. They turn it on in the second half and they win, and that was just like a release for the nation. So I think it was a right decision. And of course, they later on they qualified for the Africa Cup. AFCON in Tunisia, and they reached the final. So that was just they needed that.
Yeah, so a good vindication, I suppose. I just want to ask you about the families of these men. You mentioned they were brothers, they were fathers, they were friends of people. Have you been in touch with them, and have you ascertained kind of how they've moved on? I mean, I suppose, as you say, 32 years, they have to have moved on somehow, but how difficult has that been?
I've been in touch with some of them. I am in touch with some of them, not all of them. But they've told me very interesting, sad stories, some of them. I'm sure. It's just, some families were completely devastated. There's a story that I heard. It was late in the writing process, and I could not, I didn't include it in the book because, I need to verify and everything. But one of the players, he was an outstanding player, Timothy Mwitwa. And Timothy Mwitwa, South Africans would remember, he scored the very first meeting. It was actually South Africa's first competitive international game, first competitive international game after the apartheid era in Johannesburg, Zambia versus South Africa. And this is in 1992. I think it's around October, November 92. And he scored the winning goal. Zambia won 1-0. His wife was pregnant, heavily pregnant, and she went into labor at the funeral. That I was told. Yeah, she went. Unfortunately, she passed. Those were families that were devastated. A lot of them were devastated. Some. I'm in touch. Good friends with young Patrick Mulenga. He was 3 months old when his father, Eston Mulenga, the defender, who was an outstanding defender, he was 3 months old when the father died. Him and his brother have done very, very well. He's, went to college, got a degree, is into ecology. I meet and talk to him and tell him about his father, and Efo Chawala, the goalkeeper, who's also, his children have had a lot of success. One of his sons is a professor, actually. Yeah. I think he got a PhD in, I think, physics it was. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. So it's been a mixed bag. Some families have done well. I know a lot of them have struggled. They perhaps, I mean, they may not have received the assistance that they should have received.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
mean, the
this is the
loss.
thing, right? Like we just tend to forget the living because we're so busy remembering the dead, I guess.
Absolutely, yeah. The loss of the breadwinner. It's always especially back then, 32 years ago. The economies were very different. Zambia, of course, was in a very difficult situation economically. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I just want to fast forward to the AFCON that Zambia won and the kind of catharsis of winning it so close to the crash site, of the players going there, laying down the wreaths, and it just felt like a full circle moment. I mean, much time had passed, but did you feel as though, we're putting this properly to bed now and finally we've done what we've always wanted to do?
Yeah, actually, that's the penultimate chapter in my book. Yes, it provided, and the question I posed, did it provide closure?
Yeah.
For a lot of people, it did provide closure, but for the families, it did not really provide closure because, unfortunately, there's that issue of the report, or the official reports. Yeah, which, so that victory in Gabon, of course, for fans, a lot of fans, that provided closure. Victory where so much tragedy was experienced, but for the families, I don't think it's provided closure, or I don't think it did provide closure because they are still waiting. I mean, the ones, unfortunately, a lot of them have passed on, but the ones that are still living, they are still waiting on the official Zambian government report.
Gosh, and do you think we'll ever see that?
And that's in the book, actually. I explain.
Okay, we can't tell us everything.
I explain why the report has not been released, and it's obvious. It struck me. It was like a eureka moment for me. It was like, oh, that makes sense. Yeah.
I don't think we want to give the viewers and the listeners absolutely everything. They've got to go and buy a Crash of the Buffalo wherever it's available so that they can read about it.
Absolutely.
But I must ask you about your views on Zambian football. I mean, there was the winning of the AFCON. We've seen the women's team do spectacularly well, get to an Olympic Games, get to a World Cup. So we are seeing a little bit of progression. Do you think it's progressed as it would have done had the plane not crashed, or is that just too simplistic a thing to ask?
That was a particular generation. That generation at there might have been some momentum because I honestly believe, and I might be biased, I'm Zambian, but I did not mean for that crash. Zambia would have qualified for the World Cup in 1994 in the United States, and they possibly would have qualified for the World Cup in that was in 1998 in France, because they had the players they had. It was a combination of youth and experience. I mentioned the ones I knew, the Efo Chabalas, the goalkeeper, Dabi Makinka, Esther Malenga. But there was a new generation emerging. I did not know. I know some of their families, like Kelvin Mutale, who was outstanding, brilliant striker, who in a 12-month period, he went from playing second-tier football in Zambia, second division, to playing in Saudi Arabia, which now is the rave. Everybody's going to Saudi Arabia now. He was there then. And he tells his brother that of a possible move to Portugal, because his club, Tifik, had a Brazilian coach, and he was scoring goals. He was only there for like about 8 weeks or so, and he had scored like 8 goals, and he was on the verge of a move to Portugal. But of course, now the point is that generation, Calvin's generation, would have propelled Zambia. What would have happened thereafter, I do not know. And in a way, that explains why Zambia, when they rebuilt the team, because now they have players that were outstanding players, good players, but they could not get into the national team because of the other players that died in the plane crash. But after that, they're able to get in and still do well, still reach the AFCON final, and almost qualify for the World Cup. So there would have been momentum. But football is cyclical. After a while, one generation, they retire, they fade, and then now what's coming up the pike? And that's a problem Zambia has now, right now, because like I said, I covered. I'm old school. I don't think the quality we have right now is the same as back in the day. So that's a
Sure.
challenge. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I want to ask you about rebuilding the team. I mean, you mentioned the lack of emotional support and also the player resources, the personnel resources, but I understand that they had a Danish coach and they went and spent some time there as well in order to rebuild. But that couldn't have been easy. Were you covering them in that period where suddenly you've got to put a team out?
No, I wasn't covering them, but I
Okay.
was in touch with the Danish coach you mentioned. Unfortunately, he passed away last October last year, Roel Poulsen. So after the crash, they select 60 players, I think. Yeah, 60, sorry. I mean, they call 60
Gosh,
players for
yeah.
trials, and then they select, a small number that they send them to Denmark. And why Denmark? Again, I spoke to a gentleman who was with the Ministry of Youth and Sport then. So
Hmm.
they reached out to countries that had technical agreements with the Zambian government. They
Okay.
reached out to, the Zambian government reached out to countries that had technical agreements, and the Danish were only the first to respond. And so they responded and they said, okay, we'll host you. And the Danish government, Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Denmark, reaches out to Roel Poulsen, he was a very young coach. He was in the early
Yeah.
40s then, about 41 or so. And he had been coach of OB Odense, which is one of the top teams in Denmark. They had won titles and cups, silverware. So I spoke to Raul. He had documented everything. He sent me all the information.
Amazing.
And he had this now. And again, in a way, it's pretty interesting the way things worked out, because it was a 6-week program.
Yeah.
And those 6 weeks included the week they would be in Zambia for the game with Morocco. And he drilled the team, got them into shape. Kalusha came and joined. Johnson Walia, no relation to Kalusha, who was an outstanding winger. He also joined the team from Switzerland. And they come from a goal behind, and both Johnston and Kalusha score, against after trailing 1-0 against Morocco. So Poulsen, did a lot of the heavy lifting. And unfortunately, and this is the unfortunate part, had he stayed behind, because after that he
Yeah.
leaves.
Yeah. Yeah.
Although he did come back later, but I did continued with the campaign, I think Zambia would have qualified for the World Cup.
Yeah, so many what ifs in this incredible story. And I must ask you about yourself. I mean, this is no mean feat writing a book about, people you knew, but also an event, a real tragedy in your own country. What's next? I mean, can we expect more? I know you've done a boxing book, but any more football writing from you? You've got a World Cup coming to your shores next year, and we obviously hoping that Zambia qualify. Will you be keeping an eye on them? And what can we expect from you in the future?
Yeah, fingers crossed Zambia qualifies. It's going to be tough,
It will
It's
be.
50-50, but yeah, if they come, well and good. Yeah. Well, I don't think I have any boxing soccer books, in the pipeline. I don't think so. The only other football book I would like to write is the debate about the greatest of all time.
Okay.
A lot of the millennials, the Gen Zs, and now the Gen Alphas believe Messi's the greatest, but all the veteran, players, coaches, all mentioned Pele,
I
and
was just going to
then
ask you, Messi
Maradona
or
there.
Pele?
Yeah, Pele easily.
Easily.
Yeah, so
Maradona or
if I
Pele?
Pele, I'd say it's Pele, Maradona, and then possibly Messi number 3. Yeah. So
Okay.
if I have to write a book, that it to be on that debate, yeah.
Well, we absolutely look forward to reading that. But Jay, before we let you go, please do tell everybody where they can get Crash of the Buffalo. I mean, where is it available? Is it on an e-version for those who maybe won't get it in a bookstore? And especially for your countrymen in Zambia. I mean, I'm sure this is something that they'd really want to get their hands on.
Yeah. Well, right now, Crash of the Buffalo is available on Amazon, UK Amazon. Even I think the US Amazon is accepting orders, I think, for delivery in next month in September. Barnes
Great.
and Noble, basically online. Yeah, it's available online. Unfortunately, we've been having some challenges getting the book into Zambia,
Oh,
unfortunately. But
yeah.
basically, what it is that if there are bookstores, on the continent that are interested, they should just Google Crash of the Buffalo. It's published by Pitch Publication. Pitch Publishing, which is the premier publisher of sports books, nonfiction, sports book of all stripes, any sport, yeah. So Pitch is it's the UK publisher. So if any bookstores interested, just order from them. Otherwise, you can online. And yes, there are e-books, digital versions, yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Well, I think we'll be getting in touch with our nearest bookstores, telling them to get hold of a copy. And for people all around the continent, I think this is such an important read. And thank you for bringing such a wonderful story, and not wonderful in its events, but in its impact, and really getting us into the hearts and minds of the people involved. We appreciate the work that you've done and the story that you've shared with us on the podcast today as well. Thank you so much, Jay.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you.
Wow, what a powerful discussion and what an awesome book. Crush of the Buffalo, written by Jay Mwamba. Make sure you go out there, buy and get your copy. It's in all the regular places that you consume. And for those of you who've watched and listened, please leave a rating, leave a review, leave a comment. We love to hear from you. And of course, you can find us at our social media accounts, OTW_podcast on X, TikTok, and Instagram, or just search for the On the Whistle podcast on Facebook and YouTube to join our community. We wish you well. All the best.